Hello guys! Welcome back to my channel. A channel that discusses very dramatic movie stories, guys. In this video, I'll take you to watch a very dramatic movie about this story, entitled One Night Flame Between Me and Mr. Right. Before this story begins, don't forget to hit subscribe and like. Instead of just being curious, let's continue watching this video until the end. Okay?
The city of Los Angeles was supposed to be a beacon of hope for Lucia Alvarez, a place where she could start fresh and build a future for herself and her hardworking aunt and uncle, Theo and Rosa. She arrived with her childhood best friend, Tiffany, believing that their bond was unbreakable and that the City of Angels would finally reward their years of struggle. However, the dream turned into a waking nightmare before the first sunset. Tiffany, driven by a desperate need to clear her father's gambling debts, had already arranged to sell Lucia to a predatory debt collector named Harvey. Under the guise of a celebratory drink, Tiffany led Lucia into a trap, spiking her cocktail with a powerful sedative. As Lucia's world began to blur and spin, she realized too late that the person she trusted most had traded her soul for a handful of silver. She was dragged toward a hotel suite, her voice failing her body becoming a leaden weight, while Harvey sneered about the package he was about to unwrap. Fate intervened in the form of Julian Vaughn, a billionaire restaurateur whose presence commanded the room like a silent storm. He stumbled upon the struggle in the hotel corridor, his sharp instincts immediately recognizing that Lucia was in no more condition to consent to the man dragging her away. With a cold, clinical efficiency, Julian neutralized Harvey and rescued the semi-conscious Lucia, bringing her to the safety of his private suite. In the drug-induced haze that followed, a primal connection ignited between them, a one-night flame that was fueled by the desperate heat of the moment and the strange, magnetic pull of two souls meeting in the dark. Lucia woke up the next morning feeling the weight of the previous night's events, but before she could face the man who had saved her, a frantic call from her aunt revealed that Theo and Rosa had been detained by immigration authorities. Panicked and needing to protect her family, Lucia fled the hotel room, leaving no more name or explanation, taking only Julian's gold-plated lighter as a silent, stolen souvenir of the man she thought she would never see again. Desperate for money to hire a lawyer for her family, Lucia's journey led her to a high-end restaurant called Castle, which, unbeknownst to her, was the crown jewel of Julian Vaughn's empire. She initially entered the establishment looking for the mysterious man from the hotel, but she was quickly thrust into a crisis when a patron began to suffer from a severe, life-threatening nut allergy due to a kitchen error. While the staff panicked, Lucia acted with the precision of a seasoned medic, diagnosing the scent of almonds in the nut-free sauce and administering an EpiPen just in time. Impressed by her sharp culinary instincts and her composure under pressure, the restaurant manager offered her a job with fair wages and the staff housing, a miracle Lucia desperately needed. Meanwhile, Tiffany discovered Julian's true identity and, realizing Lucia had fumbled her chance with a billionaire, decided to steal her best friend's life once again. Tiffany showed up at Julian's mansion, claiming to be the virgin Lucia from that fateful night, manipulating Julian's sense of guilt to secure a place in his world. Little did they know that the truth was simmering in the kitchen of Castle, where Lucia and Julian were destined for a fiery reunion. The ire in the kitchen of Castle was a sharp contrast to the serene, minimalist luxury of the dining room. It was a battlefield of clashing metals, hissing steam, and the rhythmic percussion of knives against wooden boards. Lucia stood at the prep station, her hands moving with a practiced grace she had learned in her grandmother's kitchen back home. Every chop of a chili and every crush of a garlic clove was a small act of defiance against the world that had tried to break her. She felt the heavy weight of her aunt and the uncle's predicament pressing against her heart, but she channeled that anxiety into the flavors she was creating. The kitchen staff, led by a haughty senior chef named Kevin, looked at her with blatant skepticism. To them, she was just a girl off the street who happened to know how to use an EpiPen. They didn't see the fire in her eyes or the depth of her knowledge. They didn't know that she wasn't just making food, she was fighting for the only people who had ever truly loved her. As the dinner rush intensified, the pressure in the kitchen reached a boiling point. Kevin, feeling threatened by Lucia's natural talent and the manager's clear interest in her, assigned her the most menial tasks, hoping to tire her out and force her to quit. He mocked her rustic style, throwing away a batch of her salsa simply because it didn't look like the sterile, processed version the restaurant usually served. We charge $300 a head, chicha, he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. People don't want to taste a food truck in a 5-star establishment. Lucia didn't flinch. She simply picked up a new bowl and started again. She knew the true flavor couldn't be faked. And she knew that the people who paid the kind of money were looking for something they couldn't find anywhere else, something authentic. She whispered a silent prayer for Theo and Rosa, hoping the legal aid office she'd contacted would hold off until her first paycheck arrived. Miles away in the Vaughn mansion, the atmosphere was far more suffocating. Tiffany Blake was reveling in her new role as the wronged innocent. She sat in Julian's expensive living room, draped in silk robes she hadn't paid for, sipping on vintage wine that felt like a reward for her betrayal. She had studied Lucia's mannerisms for years, and she used every ounce of that knowledge to convince Julian that she was the girl from the hotel. Julian, usually a man of ironclad logic and cold detachment, found himself plagued by an unsettling sense of responsibility. He looked at Tiffany and saw a beautiful woman, but something felt fundamentally off. The girl in the hotel had felt like a forest fire raw, untamed, and hauntingly real. Tiffany felt like a curated exhibit in a museum. Yet, the evidence seemed clear. She knew about the night, she knew about the hotel, and she was unstable from the experience. He offered her a room, a gesture of penance for a night he barely remembered but felt obligated to honor. Julian's house staff, led by a perceptive housekeeper named Mrs. Gable, didn't buy Tiffany's act for a second. Mrs. Gable had served the Vaughn family for 30 years and he could spot a gold digger from a mile away. She watched as Tiffany treated the servants with a calculated cruelty, demanding acai bowls, and complaining about the low-class English spoken in the house. Mrs. Gable noticed that Tiffany's eyes were always scanning the room for valuables rather than looking for Julian's affection. "She's a viper in a dove's skin," Mrs. Gable whispered to the butler. "James, Mr. Vaughn is too honorable for his own good. He's letting his guilt blind him to the fact that this girl doesn't have the soul of the one who was in that room." They decided to play along for now, but they began to keep a meticulous record of Tiffany's behavior, waiting for the moment the mask would inevitably slip. But at Casol, the salsa challenge was underway. Kevin had run out of the restaurant's signature salsa negra, and in a moment of desperation, he had no more choice but to let Lucia take a shot at the recipe. He expected her to fail, to produce something too spicy or too unrefined for their elite clientele. Lucia took a deep breath, her senses heightened. She ignored the charred chilies he provided and went for the fresh ones she'd brought from the market that morning. She added a hint of octopus ink, not for the color, but for the briny, oceanic depth it provided. She worked with an intensity that silenced the rest of the kitchen. When she finally handed a spoon to the manager, the room went still. The manager tasted it, his eyes widening as the complex layers of smoke, chocolate, and heat danced on his palate. "This isn't just salsa," he whispered. "It's a story." Kevin's face turned a brilliant shade of purple, but he couldn't deny the quality. Lucia had won her first battle, but she knew the war for her family was just beginning. The manager, a man who valued excellence above ego, pulled Lucia aside after the shift. "The owner is returning tomorrow, Lucia. He's very particular about his staff, especially in the kitchen. But after what you did for that woman with the allergy and this saucy sink, you're exactly what he's been looking for. He wants to meet you personally." Lucia felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with a chilling dread. If the owner was the man from the hotel, would he recognize her? Would he judge her for fleeing? Or worse, would he realize she was the one who had stolen his lighter? She reached into her pocket, feeling the cold, embossed metal of the gold lighter. It had become her talisman, a reminder of the one night she had felt truly protected. She decided that she would be professional, a chef and nothing more. She needed this job too much to let a one-night flame burn down her future. The night before Julian's return to the restaurant, Lucia visited the immigration detention center. She was only allowed to see her and Rosa through a thick glass partition. Rosa looked tired, her eyes red from weeping, but she managed a weak smile for Lucia. "Don't worry about us, mija," Rosa sighed, her voice cracking. "Just stay safe. This city is full of sharks." Lucia pressed her hand against the glass, wishing she could pull her and through the barrier. "You found a job, Thea? A good one. I'm going to get you out. I promise." As she walked away from the facility, the neon lights of the city felt colder than ever. She realized that Tiffany had likely already moved on to her next mark, leaving Lucia to clean up the wreckage of their broken friendship. She felt a flicker of rage, a hot, pulsing desire for justice that she tucked away, saving it for the day she could finally face her betrayer. At the mansion, Tiffany was becoming increasingly emboldened. She had convinced Julian to take her to a high-end boutique to replace the clothes she lost during her trauma. She walked through the racks of designer dresses, picking the most expensive items with a gluttonous glee. Julian watched her from a velvet chair, his phone in his hand, his mind occupied by the logistical issues at Castle. He felt a profound sense of emptiness as he watched Tiffany preen in front of the mirror. He remembered the way the girl in the hotel had looked at him with a mixture of terror and a fierce, unyielding dignity. Tiffany looked at him like he was a bank account that had finally been unlocked. He received a text from his manager at Castle. No hire in the kitchen is a miracle worker. Saved the life and fixed the salsa negra. You need to see her. Julian felt a strange spark of curiosity, a welcome distraction from the transactional nature of his afternoon with Tiffany. The day of Julian's return to Castle arrived with a crisp, unrelenting sunlight that seemed to expose every flaw in the city. Lucia was at the restaurant 3 hours early, her uniform pressed, her hair pulled back into a severe bun. She spent the morning prepping the station with a focus that bordered on obsessive. She propped the heavy back door open with a milk crate, just as the dishwasher had told her, to let the fresh air circulate through the humid kitchen. She could hear the whispers of the other chefs. They were all nervous. The boss has a palate that can detect a single grain of salt to men, one of them whispered. Lucia adjusted her apron, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was ready. She had to be. Julian arrived at the restaurant in a sleek, black sedan, the valet scurrying to open his door. He didn't enter through the front. He preferred the back entrance, the one that led straight into the heart of his operation. He wanted to see his staff in their natural state, before they had a chance to put on their fake smiles. As he stepped out of the car, the scent of charred chilies and the fresh coriander hit him, a scent that was hauntingly familiar. He walked toward the back door, the rhythmic sound of a knife against a board drawing him in like a siren song. He stepped over the milk crate, propping the door open, and he stopped dead. Sir, standing by the prep station, was the silhouette he had been dreaming about for weeks. Lucia didn't look up immediately. She was finishing a delicate julienne of peppers, her focus absolute. The owner is here, Kevin hissed from across the room, his voice full of a panicked deference. Lucia took a deep breath, set her knife down, and he slowly turned around. The world seemed to contract into the space between her and the man standing in the doorway. Julian was even more striking in the harsh light of the kitchen. His eyes were like polished flint, his suit perfectly tailored, his aura one of absolute, terrifying power. He stared at her, his expression shifting from surprise to a dark, simmering intensity. You, he whispered, the word carrying more weight than a shout. Lucia felt the gold lighter in her pocket grow hot, a physical manifestation of the secret she was carrying. The kitchen staff stood frozen, sensing the tectonic shift in the room's energy. Kevin looked between Julian and Lucia, his confusion turning into a dawning realization that he had made that terrible mistake in mistreating the new hire. Julian walked toward Lucia, his footsteps silent on the non-slip mats. He stopped just inches away, his scent a mix of expensive sandalwood and the crisp air of authority overwhelming her senses. The manager told me you were a miracle worker, Julian sighed, his voice low and dangerous. He didn't mention that you were a thief. Lucia's chin tilted up, her old defiance returning. He didn't steal anything that wasn't offered as a rescue, Mr. Von. Andy, I'm here to work, not to reminisce. Julian's jaw tightened. He admired her spirit even as it frustrated him. He looked at the bowl of salsa she had just finished, the one that had silenced the kitchen. He picked up a spoon and he tasted it, his eyes never leaving hers. The flavor was explosive, a perfect mirror of the night they had shared. It was bold, complex, and unforgettably authentic. This is Castle's new signature sauce, Julian announced to the room, his voice booming with an authority that left no more room for debate. He turned back to Lucia, leaning in until his lips were inches from her ear. My office, 10 minutes. Andy, bring my lighter. He turned and he walked away, leaving Lucia standing in a storm of whispered questions and jealous glares. In Julian's private office, the atmosphere was thick with the tension of things unsaid. Lucia stood in front of his mahogany desk, her hands clasped behind her back, the gold lighter resting in her palm. Julian was staring out the window at the city he owned, his back to her. Why did you run? He asked, his voice devoid of its usual coldness. Lucia didn't hesitate. My family was in danger. He didn't have time for a billionaire's morning after protocol. Julian turned around, his eyes searching hers. I've had a girl living in my house for the last 3 days claiming to be you. She knew every detail. She knew about the hotel. She even knew about the virginity. Lucia felt a cold wave of nausea wash over her. Tiffany, she whispered, the name a curse on her lips. The realization that her best friend had not only sold her but was now wearing her life like a stolen garment was the final straw for Lucia. She told Julian everything: the betrayal at the club, the spiked drink, the dirty Harvey, and the detention of her aunt and the uncle. She didn't ask for pity. She spoke with a raw, jagged honesty that made Julian's blood run cold. He realized then that he had been hosting a parasite while the woman who had actually touched his soul was mopping floors in his kitchen. His guilt transformed into a cold, calculating rage. She wants to be Mrs. Vaughn? Julian sighed, a predatory smile playing on his lips. Then we should give her exactly what she deserves. But first, we're getting your family out of the detention center. Julian made 3 phone calls. Within an hour, a team of high-priced immigration attorneys was at the detention center, armed with the paperwork and the political leverage that only a man like Julian could provide. Lucia sat in the back of Julian's car, her hands shaking as they pulled up to the gate. She saw Theo and Rosa walking out, looking bewildered but safe. The reunion was a blur of tears and desperate hugs. Julian watched from a distance, his heart feeling a strange, unfamiliar warmth. He realized that Lucia wasn't just a one-night flame. She was a woman of immense strength and the loyalty, qualities that were rarer in his world than the diamonds Tiffany was currently shopping for. The city of Los Angeles was supposed to be a beacon of hope for Lucia Alvarez, a place where she could start fresh and build a future for herself and her hardworking aunt and uncle, Theo and Rosa. She arrived with her childhood best friend, Tiffany, believing that their bond was unbreakable and that the City of Angels would finally reward their years of struggle. However, the dream turned into a waking nightmare before the first sunset. Tiffany, driven by a desperate need to clear her father's gambling debts, had already arranged to sell Lucia to a predatory debt collector named Harvey. Under the guise of a celebratory drink, Tiffany led Lucia into a trap, spiking her cocktail with a powerful sedative. As Lucia's world began to blur and spin, she realized too late that the person she trusted most had traded her soul for a handful of silver. She was dragged toward a hotel suite, her voice failing her body becoming a leaden weight, while Harvey sneered about the package he was about to unwrap. Fate intervened in the form of Julian Vaughn, a billionaire restaurateur whose presence commanded the room like a silent storm. He stumbled upon the struggle in the hotel corridor, his sharp instincts immediately recognizing that Lucia was in no more condition to consent to the man dragging her away. With a cold, clinical efficiency, Julian neutralized Harvey and rescued the semi-conscious Lucia, bringing her to the safety of his private suite. In the drug-induced haze that followed, a primal connection ignited between them, a one-night flame that was fueled by the desperate heat of the moment and the strange, magnetic pull of 2 souls meeting in the dark. Lucia woke up the next morning feeling the weight of the previous night's events, but before she could face the man who had saved her, a frantic call from her aunt revealed that Theo and Rosa had been detained by immigration authorities. Panicked and needing to protect her family, Lucia fled the hotel room, leaving no more name or explanation, taking only Julian's gold-plated lighter as a silent, stolen souvenir of the man she thought she would never see again. Desperate for money to hire a lawyer for her family, Lucia's journey led her to a high-end restaurant called Castle, which, unbeknownst to her, was the crown jewel of Julian Vaughn's empire. She initially entered the establishment looking for the mysterious man from the hotel, but she was quickly thrust into a crisis when a patron began to suffer from a severe, life-threatening nut allergy due to a kitchen error. While the staff panicked, Lucia acted with the precision of a seasoned medic, diagnosing the scent of almonds in the nut-free sauce and administering an EpiPen just in time. Impressed by her sharp culinary instincts and her composure under pressure, the restaurant manager offered her a job with fair wages and the staff housing, a miracle Lucia desperately needed. Meanwhile, Tiffany discovered Julian's true identity and, realizing Lucia had fumbled her chance with a billionaire, decided to steal her best friend's life once again. Tiffany showed up at Julian's mansion, claiming to be the virgin Lucia from that fateful night, manipulating Julian's sense of guilt to secure a place in his world. Little did they know that the truth was simmering in the kitchen of Castle, where Lucia and Julian were destined for a fiery reunion. The ire in the kitchen of Castle was a sharp contrast to the serene, minimalist luxury of the dining room. It was a battlefield of clashing metals, hissing steam, and the rhythmic percussion of knives against wooden boards. Lucia stood at the prep station, her hands moving with a practiced grace she had learned in her grandmother's kitchen back home. Every chop of a chili and every crush of a garlic clove was a small act of defiance against the world that had tried to break her. She felt the heavy weight of her aunt and the uncle's predicament pressing against her heart. But she channeled that anxiety into the flavors she was creating. The kitchen staff, led by a haughty senior chef named Kevin, looked at her with blatant skepticism. To them, she was just a girl off the street who happened to know how to use an EpiPen. They didn't see the fire in her eyes or the depth of her knowledge. They didn't know that she wasn't just making food. She was fighting for the only people who had ever truly loved her. As the dinner rush intensified, the pressure in the kitchen reached a boiling point. Kevin, feeling threatened by Lucia's natural talent and the manager's clear interest in her, assigned her the most menial tasks, hoping to tire her out and force her to quit. He mocked her rustic style, throwing away a batch of her salsa simply because it didn't look like the sterile, processed version the restaurant usually served. "We charge $300 a head, chicha," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "People don't want to taste a food truck in a 5-star establishment." Lucia didn't flinch. She simply picked up a new bowl and started again. She knew the true flavor couldn't be faked, and she knew that the people who paid the kind of money were looking for something they couldn't find anywhere else, something authentic. She whispered a silent prayer for Theo and Rosa, hoping the legal aid office she'd contacted would hold off until her first paycheck arrived. Miles away in the Vaughn mansion, the atmosphere was far more suffocating. Tiffany Blake was reveling in her new role as the wronged innocent. She sat in Julian's expensive living room, draped in silk robes she hadn't paid for, sipping on vintage wine that felt like a reward for her betrayal. She had studied Lucia's mannerisms for years, and she used every ounce of that knowledge to convince Julian that she was the girl from the hotel. Julian, usually a man of ironclad logic and cold detachment, found himself plagued by an unsettling sense of responsibility. He looked at Tiffany and saw a beautiful woman, but something felt fundamentally off. The girl in the hotel had felt like a forest fire raw, untamed, and hauntingly real. Tiffany felt like a curated exhibit in a museum. Yet, the evidence seemed clear. She knew about the night. After ensuring her family was settled in a safe house Julian provided, the focus turned to the endgame for Tiffany. Julian and Lucia spent the evening in his study, plotting the exposure. They decided on a grand unveiling at Castle's anniversary gala the following night. Julian would invite Tiffany as his guest of honor, allowing her to believe she was about to be officially introduced as the future Mrs. Vaughn. Lucia would be in the kitchen, preparing the most authentic meal of Tiffany's life. "She thinks she outplayed you, Lucia," Julian sighed, pouring her a glass of wine. "But she forgot one thing. You can't fake the flavor of a soul." Lucia looked at him, the gold lighter gleaming between them on the table. The flame was no longer just a memory. It was a weapon. The night of the gala arrived with a dramatic flair that only Los Angeles could produce. The elite of the city, celebrities, politicians, and the industry titans descended upon Castle in a sea of tuxedos and floor-length gowns. Tiffany arrived on Julian's arm, wearing a dress that cost more than Lucia's aunt made in a year. She paraded through the room, her laughter high and artificial, basking in the envious glares of the other women. She felt untouchable. She had the billionaire, the mansion, and the future. She didn't notice the way Julian's eyes frequently drifted toward the kitchen doors, or the way the staff looked at her with a mixture of pity and contempt. In the kitchen, the atmosphere was electric. Lucia was leading the line, her authority now unquestioned after Julian's endorsement. She was preparing a special tasting menu for the head table, each dish a subtle jab at Tiffany's lies. The first course was a chilled deception, a complex cheese that looked like one thing but tasted like another. The main course was a rustic revelation, the fairy salsa and the taco recipe that Kevin had tried to throw away, now elevated to an art form. Lucia worked with a calm, lethal precision, knowing that every plate that left the kitchen was a nail in Tiffany's social coffin. The climax occurred during the main course. Julian stood up to make a toast, the room falling into a respectful silence. He spoke about the importance of authenticity and the danger of living a lie. He looked at Tiffany, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Tonight, I want to introduce you to the woman who truly changed my life," Julian announced. Tiffany stood up, smoothing her dress, her face glowing with triumph. "The woman who saved a life in this very room, and whose soul is in every bite of the food you're eating tonight." He gestured toward the kitchen doors. Lucia stepped out, still in her chef's whites, her face clean of makeup but radiant with a power that Tiffany could never replicate. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Tiffany froze, her glass of champagne trembling in her hand as she looked at the maid she thought she had discarded. The guests looked between the two women, the curated imitation and the raw reality. Lucia walked toward the head table, her eyes fixed on Tiffany. She didn't say a word. She simply pulled the gold lighter from her pocket and placed it on the table in front of Julian. "You forgot this, Julian," Lucia sighed, her voice steady and clear. "Just like your Fianca forgot to tell you that she was the one who sold me to Harvey for 30 grand. The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. Tiffany tried to laugh it off, calling Lucia a disgruntled employee and a liar, but the mask was already shattered. Harvey, who Julian had invited as a surprise guest, stepped out from the shadows, eager to save his own skin by testifying against Tiffany. He produced the text messages, the bank transfers, and the recording of the spiked drink. The socialites who had been groveling to Tiffany moments ago now backed away as if she were a leper. Tiffany's world collapsed in a matter of seconds, her dreams of wealth replaced by the looming shadow of a prison cell for human trafficking and fraud. Julian didn't look at Tiffany as the security guards led her away. He looked only at Lucia. He walked around the table and took her hand, his grip warm and certain. "I told you she would get what she deserved," he whispered. Lucia felt the final weight of the last few weeks lift from her shoulders. She had her family, she had her dignity, and she had the man who had seen her through the darkness. The gala continued, but the one-night flame had become a steady, enduring light. Lucia returned to the kitchen, not as a servant, but as the heart of the restaurant. While Julian stood by her side, finally finding the Mr. Right he hadn't even known he was looking for. The aftermath of the gala was a whirlwind of legal proceedings and the social fallout. Tiffany was charged with multiple felonies, her defense crumbling under the weight of Julian's resources and Lucia's testimony. Lucia spent her days rebuilding her life with Theo and Rosa, who were now living in a beautiful apartment near the coast, courtesy of the Vaughn Foundation. Lucia remained the head chef at Castle, her name becoming synonymous with the Los Angeles culinary scene, a scene that valued truth over artifice. Her relationship with Julian evolved into a partnership of deep mutual respect and a love that was no longer a secret. The story of the Alferez Vaughn reunion became a legend in the city, a cautionary tale for those who thought they could outplay a soul. People would often visit Castle just to taste the salsa that had exposed a billionaire's imposter. Lucia would look out from the kitchen at the diverse crowd of people enjoying her food, and she would feel a profound sense of gratitude. She had survived the fire, she had outlasted the betrayal, and she had found her way home. The gold lighter remained on Julian's desk, no longer a stolen souvenir, but a symbol of the night the flame began, a flame that would burn for a lifetime. As the years moved into a second decade, the legacy of Lucia's culinary revolution at Castle began to reshape the entire fine dining landscape of Southern California. No longer was luxury defined solely by imported truffles and the starched white tablecloths. It was now measured by the depth of the narrative behind the ingredients. Lucia established a legacy kitchen program, specifically designed to mentor young immigrants who had arrived in the city with nothing but their family recipes and a desire to work. She became a matriarch of the industry, a woman whose influence was felt in every neighborhood bistro and every high-stakes corporate dining room. Julian remained her most steadfast supporter, using his vast logistical network to ensure that her vision of authentic justice was exported to restaurants around the globe. Tiffany Blake's journey through the justice system was a slow and public dismantling of her vanity. From her prison cell, she watched the news reports of Lucia's international success, her bitterness a toxic companion in the quiet hours of the night. She had tried to steal a life, only to find that a life is not a garment that can be worn by anyone. It is a tapestry woven from experiences, sacrifices, and a truth that she had never possessed. She realized too late that her father's debt wasn't the weight that had sunk her. It was her own refusal to believe that she was worth more than a transaction. She became a footnote in the city's history, a warning to the social climbers of the next generation. The internal architecture of Julian Vaughn's life also underwent a profound transformation. The cold, clinical billionaire had been replaced by a man who understood the value of vulnerability. He no longer viewed his business as a series of mergers and acquisitions, but as a platform for human connection. He and Lucia never officially married in a grand, public ceremony. They felt that their souls had already been bound by the night in the hotel and the battle in the kitchen. They lived in a house filled with the scent of roasted peppers and the sound of laughter, a house that Mrs. Gable finally declared to be full of light. They had outplayed the cynics, outlasted the skeptics, Andy outloved the shadows of their past. One summer evening, Lucia returned to the original hotel where it had all begun. She stood in the corridor where Julian had saved her, the memory of her terror now a distant, muted echo. She walked into the suite, not as a victim, but as a guest of the man who owned the building. Julian was waiting for her by the window, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. He held up the gold lighter, the flame flickering in the breeze. "I never did thank you for stealing this," he sighed, a genuine smile on his face. Lucia laughed, taking his hand. "I didn't steal it, Julian. I was just holding onto it until you were ready to see me." The narrative's resonance was felt in the world of immigration law as well. The Alferez Precedent, a series of legal reforms Julian funded, ensured that families like Theo and the Roses would have access to immediate legal representation and a fair path to residency. The story of the chef and the billionaire became a rallying cry for activists, a proof that one person's dignity could change a system. Lucia sat on the board of the foundation, her voice a resonant authority that forced the powerful to look at the invisible people who kept their cities running. She was no more longer the girl fleeing through a hotel lobby. She was the architect of a more compassionate future. As Lucia entered her 50s, she began to write a cookbook that was more of a memoir, titled The Flavor of Fire. In it, she detailed her journey from the streets to the kitchen, and from betrayal to love. The book became a global bestseller, translated into 30 languages. One of its most famous passages read, "You can buy a recipe, but you cannot buy the soul of the cook. You can steal a name, but you cannot steal the heat of the flame." It was a final, graceful closure to the conflict with Tiffany, a testament to the fact that her essence was entirely her own. She was Lucia Alferez, and she had finally arrived. In the final quiet moments of the narrative, we imagine the garden of the Vaughn estate at night. The long shadows of the trees stretch across the stone paths, and the iris filled with the scent of jasmine and the distant roar of the ocean. Lucia and Julian are sitting on a bench, their hands entwined, watching the stars. The silence is no more longer heavy with things unsaid. It is light with the weight of a legacy fulfilled. They are two souls who found their home in the most unlikely of places, and they stayed together until the dawn. The one-night flame was finished, but the eternal light had just begun. The legacy of Casal continued to flourish under the leadership of Lucias Montes, each one carrying a piece of her spirit into their own kitchens. The restaurant remained a sanctuary of authenticity in a world of artifice, a place where every meal was a reminder that truth is the most important ingredient. The gold lighter was eventually donated to the city's Museum of Social History, displayed next to a photo of Lucia in her chef's whites. The plaque read, "To the woman who showed us that the smallest spark can burn down a kingdom of lies." It was a permanent reminder of the night a billionaire met his match and a girl found her power. As the credits roll on this 60-minute journey, we see a montage of the lives Lucia touched, the students who graduated from her academy, the families reunited by her foundation, and the countless patrons who had been moved by her food. We see Julian, older and more content, standing in the kitchen as Lucia tastes a new sauce. He smiles, and she winks at him, the same fire in her eyes that had first caught his attention in that hotel corridor. They had won the game, they had outlived the betrayal, and they had found the only thing that truly mattered, each other. And so, we leave the world of Lucia and Julian. It has been a 60-minute journey of shadow and light, of secrets and truth. May you carry the spirit of the chef with you, standing up for your own dignity in your own corner of the world. Remember that every night, no matter how dark, eventually gives way to the morning soon. The legacy is secure, the family is safe, and the love is forever. Goodbye to the one-night flame, and hello to the life that is truly, finally, absolute. The internal architecture of the city's culinary school was eventually dedicated to Lucia Alferez, but the most prominent feature wasn't a statue of her. It was a functioning communal kitchen where anyone from the neighborhood could come and learn the basics of cooking for free. The inscription at the entrance read, "To the courage of those who feed the soul, and the strength of those who stand by their flame." It was a permanent reminder to every student that true excellence isn't found in a Michelin star, but in the integrity of the work. Lucia attended the opening, looking at the diverse faces of the next generation and feeling a profound sense of completeness. Julian Vaughn passed away peacefully on a spring evening, his hand clutched in Lucia's just as it had been on the day they reunited at Castle. The entire city mourned the loss of a man who had been a titan of industry but a servant of the heart. But for Lucia, the silence of their home was the only thing that mattered. She stayed in their house, surrounded by the memories of the man who had redefined her world. She was not afraid of the future, for she knew that the life they had built would sustain her until they were reunited. The billionaire was gone, but his honor remained the law of the land. Lucia lived for several more years, a beloved figure in the city and a guiding light for her family. She saw her grandchildren grow into compassionate adults, and she saw the foundation reach new heights of global impact. She was at peace with her past, realizing that every shadow had been necessary to find the light when her time finally came. She passed away with a smile on her face, her final gaze fixed on the gold lighter on her nightstand, a symbol of the journey that had finally carried her home. The Queen is at rest. The narrative ends as it began, with a look at the city of Los Angeles at night. The neon lights still blur, but they are no more longer predatory. They are the lights of a city that is awake, safe, and thriving. In the distance, the silhouette of Castle stands against the starlit sky, a silent guardian of the city's history and its future. The sound of the wind through the trees carries a whisper of a woman's laughter, Lucia's laughter, perhaps. The silence is no more longer heavy. It is light with the weight of fulfillment. The one-night flame had become an eternal song of passion and truth. May you carry the spirit of Lucia Alvarez with you as you navigate the complexities of your own life. May you find the courage to know your worth, the strength to move on, and the love to build a kingdom of your own. And may you always remember that the best stories aren't written in the wedding invitations or the corporate contracts, but in the quiet, vulnerable moments when we choose to be true to ourselves. Stand tall, for you are the architect of your own story, and the world is waiting for your move. The visual memory of Tiffany Blake fading into the background of Lucia's life becomes absolute. We are left with the echoing footsteps of a woman who realized that her power was never something to be given away or granted by a man. Lucia's transformation from a betrayed friend to a visionary leader remains a beacon for anyone trapped in a toxic narrative. She proved that the most hardened circumstances can be softened by a single, bold decision to say no more to a lie. Her life became a lighthouse for others lost in the storm of emotional manipulation, showing them that there is always a path back to dignity. The final notes of the narration blend with the sounds of a vibrant city, a city that Lucia and Julian helped to shape. The streets are alive, the people are free, and the shadow of betrayal is a distant memory. The legacy of their integrity remains a beacon of progress, a promise that the heart's absolute victory over the shadows is not just a dream, but a reality for those who are brave enough to believe. The story is finished, but the impact is eternal. The chef has moved on. In the final quiet moments of this 60-minute journey, we imagine the balcony of the castle headquarters at night. Lucia stands alone, looking out at the stars. The silence is no more longer heavy with things unsaid. It is light with the weight of a legacy fulfilled. She is a soul who found her home in the truth, and stayed there until the dawn. Her journey from the hotel corridor to the mountain home was a long and painful one, but it was a journey toward the light. It was a journey that turned a scandal into a song of eternal passion. The internal architecture of the Von Alvarez legacy didn't just change in spirit, it changed in structure. Their Montes spearhead a revolutionary shift in the industry's investment strategy. They moved away from the traditional power plays and toward impact investing, funding local farmers and the sustainable food networks. They became known as the billionaires with a conscience, a title that would have made Julian beam with pride. This transformation ensured that the Von name would be synonymous with progress rather than fear for centuries to come. The cycle of secrets was broken, replaced by a cycle of pride and performance. The city of Stand-in itself changed under the influence of the new era. The shadow districts that had once been the breeding ground for the city's more corrupt activities were transformed into vibrant community hubs. The transition was not without its challenges. So were always those who preferred the old ways of fear and the intimidation. But the Von reputation was a formidable deterrent, and the city's financial power was a persuasive carrot. Together, they proved that a city could be more prosperous by being more just. The Stand-in Renaissance, as it was later called, was a direct result of a billionaire who decided to love his family more than his power. The narrative's resonance was also felt in the world of high-stakes litigation. The case against Tiffany Blake, even though it ended in her incarceration, set new precedents for the prosecution of psychological abuse and the financial sabotage in friendships. The Alferez tapes were used in legal textbooks to illustrate the devastating impact of long-term betrayal and the importance of forensic accounting in uncovering hidden crimes. This legal legacy ensured that other hidden victims or cancelled sisters would have a better chance at justice than Lucia had at the start of her journey. In her 80s, Lucia took up sculpting, a hobby she had abandoned when she first met Julian. Her work was abstract and powerful, often using bronze and stone to depict the strength of the human spirit. She called her most famous series The Unbroken Lighter, which depicted the journey from shadow into light. Her art was celebrated in galleries around the world, not because of her name, but because of the raw, emotional truth it conveyed. It was a final, creative expression of her resilience, a way to show the world that even the deepest scars can be transformed into something enduring and beautiful. Julian's final project was the creation of a national archive for family history. He wanted to help other families who had been torn apart by betrayal or corruption to find their way back to their roots. He donated a significant portion of his wealth to fund the technology and the personnel required to track down lost legacies and the missing family members. He spent his final days working in the archives, often being the one to make the call to a woman like Lucia to tell her that her family's honor had been restored. It was a poignant, beautiful way to end a life that had started in the cold world of corporate finance. The legacy of the one-night flame lived on through the children of the Montes they had raised. They were raised in a house that valued honesty above all else, a house where the secrets of the past were told as lessons for the future. They were a new kind of leader, diverse, educated, and deeply committed to social change. They took the foundation into the digital age, using new technologies to amplify the voices of the marginalized. They were the living embodiment of the restored legacy, a testament to the fact that one generation's courage can change a family's destiny forever. As we look back on the 60-minute narrative, we see that it was never just a story about a one-night stand. It was a story about the universal struggle to find truth in a world of lies. It was a story about the power of a woman's love to survive betrayal and the strength of a soul to face its own shadow. It was a story that reminded us that the most important battles are not the ones we fight in the boardroom, but the ones we fight within ourselves to remain human in inhuman circumstances. Lucia and Julian showed us that true power is the power to be yourself. The final moments of the narrative focus on the castle garden at dusk. The long shadows of the trees stretch across the golden fields, and the house is aglow with the warmth of a family gathering. Inside, we see the photos on the mantle, the grainy image of the lighter, the photo of Lucia at her graduation, and the main awards for her humanitarian work. It is a house that has seen much pain, but it is now a house of peace. The silence is no more longer suffocating. It is a silence of contentment and closure. The chef is finally home. The one-night flame between me and the Mr. Right narration concludes with a final look at the enduring nature of hope. It reminds us that no matter how long the struggle, the truth will always catch up, and that catch can be a blessing rather than a curse. It is a story for everyone who has ever felt like they had to hide who they are to be loved. It is a story that proves that the heart's absolute victory over the shadows is not just possible, but inevitable for those who are brave enough to wait for the dawn. Thank you for listening to the story of Lucia Alferez, where the most important move was always the move toward truth. The internal architecture of the city's high society continued to rumble long after Tiffany's public downfall. The story of the stolen virginity became a cautionary tale whispered in the country clubs and the boardrooms of Los Angeles, a stark reminder that in the age of information, LA is a temporary fortress that eventually crumbles under the weight of reality. Julian Vaughn's decision to stand by the maid who truly saved him rather than the heiress who sold her friend was seen as a revolutionary act of social defiance. It challenged the very foundations of the elite hierarchy, suggesting that worth was found in the character of one's actions rather than the digits in a bank account. This cultural shift began to open doors for others like Lucia, talented, hardworking individuals who had previously been kept in the shadows by the iron gates of classism. As Lucia's reputation grew, so did her influence on the culinary world. She didn't just stop at refining the menu at Castle. She began to collaborate with local urban farmers, ensuring that every ingredient served in the restaurant had a face and a story behind it. She turned the kitchen into a sanctuary of education, where the clashing of pans was accompanied by the sharing of ancestral wisdom. Her Table of Truth initiative, where patrons could eat a meal prepared by a rotating cast of immigrant chefs, became the most sought-after reservation in the country. Lucia was no more longer just a chef. She was a cultural curator, a woman who used the language of spice and hit to bridge the gap between the powerful and the marginalized. Every plate she served was a silent testimony to her journey from a spiked drink in a dark club to the brilliant light of her own success. Tiffany Blake's fate in the legal system was a slow and public dismantling of her vanity. During her trial, the defense tried to argue that she was a victim of circumstance, forced into her actions by her father's debts. But when Lucia took the stand, her voice steady and her eyes clear, the narrative of victimhood vanished. Lucia didn't speak with hatred. She spoke with the cold clarity of a woman who had been betrayed to the marrow of her bones. She detailed the moment she felt the sedative hit her system, the moment she realized her best friend was watching her be dragged away with a smile of relief. The jury didn't see a girl who made a mistake. They saw a predator who had traded a human life for a fresh start. Tiffany's sentence was a heavy one, but for Lucia, the true justice wasn't the prison cell, it was the moment she realized Tiffany no longer had any power to hurt her soul.